It was Halloween night in 2004 when Sarah's life changed forever. She had heard the urban legends, of course, everyone in the small town of Milford had. Hollow Creek Road, an old, desolate stretch of highway, was said to be haunted by something far worse than a ghost. The stories varied. Some said it was a spirit of a man who had died in a car accident there, while others claimed it was the ghost of a woman who had been murdered in the woods nearby. But one story stuck with Sarah, the tale of a black truck that would appear out of nowhere, chasing unsuspecting travelers into oblivion. At 17, Sarah was skeptical. Ghost stories were for kids, and she was far too mature to believe in such nonsense. But on Halloween night, after a party with her friends, Sarah found herself driving alone down Hollow Creek Road. The moon was full, casting long shadows across the asphalt, and the cold October air pressed against her car windows. She hadn't intended to take that route home, but after dropping off her last friend, it was the quickest way. The road was as lonely and quiet as she remembered, with dense trees lining both sides, blocking out most of the moonlight. The only sounds were the hum of her engine and the occasional rustle of wind in the leaves. She turned on the radio to break the silence, but no station seemed to come in clearly, just static and garbled voices. Frustrated, she switched it off and focused on the road ahead. As Sarah drove, her thoughts wandered. She tried to shake the uneasy feeling that crept into her mind, reminding herself that the legends were just stories. But something about the stillness of the night unsettled her. The road seemed darker than it should be, and the trees felt closer, almost as if they were leaning toward her. She gripped the steering wheel tighter and pressed her foot down on the accelerator, eager to reach the town limits. That's when she saw the headlights. In her rearview mirror, two bright lights appeared, far in the distance at first, but getting closer quickly. At first, she thought nothing of it, just another car on the road, though she hadn't seen any others all night. But as the lights grew nearer, something felt off. The vehicle wasn't slowing down, and it was approaching far faster than it should have been on such a narrow, winding road. Sarah's heart rate quickened. She glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was past midnight. Who would be out here, driving this fast? She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, trying to convince herself that it was just someone in a hurry. But as the truck drew closer, it became clear that this was no ordinary car. The vehicle behind her was a massive, black truck, its chrome grille gleaming in the moonlight. It was old, too old to be on the road anymore, but it looked almost brand new, as if it had just rolled off the assembly line decades ago. Its headlights were unnaturally bright, casting an eerie glow over the road and into Sarah's car. Suddenly, the truck surged forward, speeding up until it was only a few feet behind her bumper. Sarah's pulse raced, and she instinctively pushed the gas pedal harder. The road twisted and turned, and she struggled to keep control of the car as it barreled down the darkened highway. But the truck matched her speed, staying impossibly close, its engine growling like a beast in the night. Panic began to set in. This wasn't normal. No one drove like this, not on Hollow Creek Road. Sarah's hands shook as she tried to maintain her speed without careening off the road. The truck roared behind her, its headlights blinding in her mirrors. She couldn't see the driver, but she felt watched, like whoever, or whatever, was behind the wheel wanted to do her harm. Suddenly, the truck swerved violently, slamming into the back of her car. The impact jolted her forward, and she screamed as she struggled to control the vehicle. The truck didn't let up. It rammed her again, harder this time, sending her skidding toward the shoulder. Sarah fought to regain control, her mind racing. Why was this happening? What did they want? There was no time to think. The truck surged forward again, this time pulling up beside her. For a brief moment, Sarah turned her head and looked. The truck's windows were tinted so dark that she couldn't see inside, but she could feel it, the presence of something malevolent, something that wanted her dead. Her heart pounded in her chest as the truck swerved toward her again, this time attempting to push her off the road. Sarah jerked the steering wheel, veering back into the center lane. Her mind raced with a single thought: I have to get out of here. She glanced ahead and saw a narrow side road coming up. Without thinking, she slammed on her brakes and made a sharp turn onto the dirt path, hoping to lose the truck in the trees. The tires skidded across the gravel, and her car fishtailed for a moment before she managed to regain control. The truck roared behind her, but she couldn't tell if it had followed her onto the side road. The dirt path wound deeper into the woods, and Sarah could barely see where she was going. Branches scratched at the sides of her car, and rocks kicked up under the tires. But the truck's headlights had disappeared. Had she lost it? For a few moments, there was nothing but the sound of her car and her own ragged breathing. Sarah slowed down, her heart still hammering in her chest. She was safe, or at least she thought she was. She pulled over to the side of the road and killed the engine, sitting in the silence, trying to calm her nerves. But the silence didn't last long. From somewhere behind her, she heard the rumble of an engine. Her blood ran cold. She fumbled for the keys, trying to start the car again, but her hands were shaking too much. The engine roared louder, closer. She glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the headlights again, piercing through the trees, heading straight for her. The black truck was back. Before she could react, it slammed into her car from behind, sending her vehicle skidding off the road and into the trees. The world spun around her as metal crunched and glass shattered. Sarah screamed, but the sound was drowned out by the deafening roar of the truck's engine. When the car finally came to a stop, Sarah was upside down, hanging from her seatbelt. The world around her was silent again, save for the ticking of the car's engine as it cooled. Her head throbbed, and blood dripped from a cut on her forehead. She tried to move, but pain shot through her body. The truck was gone. The headlights had vanished, leaving her in total darkness. Minutes passed, maybe hours, before Sarah heard the sound of sirens in the distance. Eventually, paramedics and police arrived, pulling her from the wreckage. They found her car crumpled against a tree, but there was no sign of the truck. As Sarah was loaded into the ambulance, one of the officers approached her, his face pale. "You're lucky to be alive," he said. "We've had reports about that truck for years, but no one ever believed the stories. People see it, just like you did, and then it disappears. You're the first person we've ever found." Sarah never drove down Hollow Creek Road again. But to this day, she can't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, the black truck is still waiting,